Hello, this is part two of native accent in language learning, and I wanted to go more in detail of what I discussed previously. So the first part was a general introduction on on the difficulties that adults face when learning a language in general, and right now I want to discuss the 5 steps that I go through in order to try to acquire a native-like accent. Let me first tell you that the first step that you have to do, or at least that I do, is theoretical. It means that a lot of courses, for example, Assimil or Teach Yourself, provide an introduction on phonetics, a brief introduction on the mechanics of the sounds. It means that they consider single sounds, and they visualize more or less the pronunciation, so I call it mechanics, of a few things that make up the language. For example, they start by showing you how vowels work. And then, for example, in Italian, it's the typical 5 vowels, and then they show you how to aggregate vowels. That means the possible combination of vowels. For example, diphthongs or diphthongs. I don't remember how you spell it in English. And then, for example, in French, it's different. In Italian, there's the advantage that the vowels don't change in any position, even if they're with 3 vowels, a group of 3 vowels, they just stay the same, and it's very different for other languages, especially French, for example, or English. And then there's consonants. So not only consonants in general, and so isolated consonants, but also group of consonants. In Italian, you also have double consonants, which is a peculiarity of the Italian language, and they not only change the way the consonant itself is produced, but also the preceding vowel. So and then there's of course the combination of vowels plus and with consonants. So these vowels will be pronounced just separately, and then within a word in a word. So let's suppose that you have done this first step. That means that you have seen how vowels, consonants, and vowels plus consonants work. This is the first, what I call the first theoretical step, in the sense that it's a necessary step that you have to go through, and some of you have already seen, for example, in Assimil, how this works. After the first step, the second step, that is step 2, is to directly stick to the language, so attack the language, so to say. It means that after the brief introduction, you will have to read immediately the dialogues. That means the voices of native speakers talking and interacting with each other. What you have to do here is to pay attention, listen attentively to the way vowels are pronounced, and vowels and consonants are pronounced. A very important feature in step 2 is to listen and read at the same time, because this action creates a bond between words and sounds, which will turn out to be very useful later. Step 3 is something that few courses provide, and that's my personal technique, which is called phonetic analysis. Now, the musicality of a language that I discussed previously with the example of prendiamo l'autostrada is a difficult feature, not only to grasp, but also to visualize. How do you visualize a sentence? Well, you can use tools. You can use some softwares, some soft programs that actually do show you how human voice is represented in terms of a physical wave. But I apply this technique directly with a very simple tool, which is a pencil and a piece of paper. I use markers. What is a marker? You will see in part 3 what a marker is. I use a few markers in order to visualize more or less how the sentence is uttered. And in step 4, I will use these guidelines that I myself created in order to utter and repeat a sentence. So very important principle is that bad pronunciation in general is the result of imitation without understanding. That means that a lot of people they think they can just imitate the native speaker while talking, for example, and think that they can actually pick up the way native speakers talk. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Or some people actually do succeed in imitating the sounds for a long period of time, and then they turn out to be very fluent speakers of that language. But for most of us, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So very important, sticking to this principle, you have to try to understand how a sentence works. So I'm talking about mechanics of sounds in the brief introduction, and the mechanic of sounds is visible if you, for example, go on Google Translate and have them pronounce a word. But the dynamics, that is the intonation, musicality, whatever you want to call it, is something more difficult that you have to try to figure out with something. And I do it with this phonetic analysis and with markers. And the fifth step is absolutely mandatory, and it is for a native-like pronunciation, and it is the contact with native speakers. Because as I said, our brain is an auditory filter, so it kind of sees, it has gaps, and there's no way to fill in these gaps if we are not attentive. You have to be flexible. That means that you always have to be constantly curious about what you pronounce well and what you don't. Right? You could tell me, well, yeah, but I can't see it. I don't know how to pronounce that. I didn't realize how this works. I can't by myself. That's the reason why these small gaps can be filled with a native speaker pointing out to you the things that you didn't understand and that did elude you. So this is part 2, and part 3 I will actually explain what it means to do a phonetic perform, to carry out a phonetic analysis on a text. Thank you so much for listening to me. See you in part 3. Bye.